Guys, I have a serious problem. I cannot put Sparking Zero down. Well, I bought the game on Steam, so I don't technically have a physical copy to set down, but you get my point. I honestly didn't even want to stop to make this video. The game is just so damn good. It really is my dream Dragon Ball game. Is it perfect? Very few games are, and this one isn't an exception. And I do have some minor gripes that we'll get to, but man, the good far outweighs the bad here. We're going to give the game our usual treatment and touch on story, gameplay, mechanics, and more. So buckle up because this is going to be a bit of a longer one.
So, Hotshot, you want to fight Majin Buu?
Fight you? No. I want to kill you.
Alright, story. I like the story mode, which may be a bit of a hot take for some, and I can see why, since there isn't quite as much as what we had in previous Sparking or Tenkaichi games, but I did appreciate this game's take on it. Let me explain. Instead of the sort of more traditional take on the telling of the Dragon Ball sagas, where you start off in the Saiyan saga and slowly work your way through from there, instead, story mode is broken up into different characters in a mode called Episode Battle. 8 characters are available to play as. You've got Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, Future Trunks, Frieza, Goku Black, and Jiren. By choosing one of these characters, you get to experience various battles that take place from that character's perspective. As you might expect, some of these characters, the prime example being Goku, have access to more battles than others. Not every single encounter from the show is covered, but the major ones are. The mode is laid out like this. You get these sort of still frame shots combined with pre-rendered cutscenes that give you context about the situation at hand before being thrown into an in-engine scene in the moments that lead up to battle. If you'd never seen Dragon Ball before, you'd probably have a decent understanding of what's going on, but you would definitely be left wondering about some of the details. I can tell you though, as someone who has seen and experienced the events of the anime what feels like dozens of times at this point, I kind of appreciated the straight-to-the-point style of storytelling that puts an emphasis on action. Some may call the sort of slideshow style that the in-between bits are presented in lazy, and I could see the argument for that, but regardless, I did think it did a decent job of recapping events that took place between battles. It would have been nice if these sections had been entirely narrated though, but I'll give it a pass since the quality of the in-engine cutscenes more than make up for it. Seriously, these are absolutely beautiful and coupled with great voice acting. They do an amazing job of pumping you up for the fight against whoever you're about to face off against, whether it's early on in the game against Raditz, or later on in the Tournament of Power against Jiren. Let's talk about the true highlight of episode battles though. What if scenarios. At this point, I feel the game has been out long enough to discuss spoilers, but if you don't want to be spoiled on any of these, skip to the timestamp on screen. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, you have been officially warned.
What if, Sokka? What if battles even I don't know about?
So, if you're familiar with past Tenkaichi entries from back in the PlayStation 2 days, you'll know that what if scenarios have sort of always been a staple of the series. And Sparking Zero is no exception. Episode Battle is filled with all kinds of crazy scenarios that are accessible by fulfilling certain requirements, like defeating an enemy within a certain time frame, or making certain choices that are just straight up different from canon. Like, what if instead of returning to his own timeline after the conclusion of the Goku Black saga, what if Future Trunks stuck around for a bit and ended up participating in the Tournament of Power? Or what if Goku defeated Raditz without dying and Frieza ended up coming to Earth? How about if Vegeta resisted Babidi's mind control in the Buu saga? These are just a few examples, but trust me, there are many more. And some are really, really impressive. One in particular absolutely blew me and probably just about anyone who played it away, which even though I gave a warning, I'm still not going to spoil it, and if you don't know what I'm referring to at this point, you're best off just experiencing it for yourself. Trust me, don't Google it. These what-ifs even include their own special cutscenes, which you can tell if you're in one because you'll see this text that says Sparking Episode shown in the bottom left corner, and just like the main story events, these are all presented beautifully. You can really feel that the devs poured a lot of love into these. And just going back through with all the different characters, trying to 100% complete everything and unlock all the what-if scenarios is an absolute blast, and honestly, at times, a little challenging. Depending on where you are with your skill level with the game, you may find that some of the alternate win conditions for unlocking the what-ifs, and hell, even just the story for that matter, can be challenging. It was sort of a meme for a short bit after the game released, where people were struggling against Grade 8 Vegeta, which, while I personally found the fight to not be that difficult, it was definitely a significant difficulty bump for some, and one that happens pretty early in the game when you're still learning mechanics and how things work, which is probably the reason why so many people struggled with it. The fight I struggled with the most personally was a fight against the Ginyu Force on Earth in one of the what-if paths, where you have to take on all 5 members with just Goku alone without any heals or allies. It took me hours to beat this. But the thing is, I only struggled that much because I was still pretty new at the game at the time. As big of a pain in the ass that fight was for me back in the beginning of my playthrough, I would have no issues with it at all now. The game has quite a high skill ceiling, especially when it comes to defensive options, which we'll touch on shortly, but as you play more and more, you'll find your overall skill level improving, and those fights that may have given you trouble before will become a breeze. Before we move on, I'm excited to announce a brand new partnership with Apex Gaming PCs. With custom-built PCs available in different configurations at various price points, they're sure to have an option for any gamer out there, especially when you factor in their affordable and flexible financing options. Whether you're on a budget and opting for the entry-grade Apex Bronze, or looking to dominate your competition with the Streamer Plus, featuring a super fast AMD Ryzen 7600X CPU paired alongside an NVIDIA RTX 4060 Ti and 32GB of DDR5 RAM. For a limited time, you can use my 10% discount code JARBO at checkout when purchasing. See link in the video description below. Alright, let's move on to gameplay. How does Sparking Zero actually feel to play? Well, if you've seen much gameplay, or really heard just about anyone talking about it, you'll probably be under the impression that it feels extremely similar to Tenkaichi 3. And for the most part, I'd say that's a pretty accurate statement, especially from first impressions with the game. A lot of mechanics are carried over directly from its predecessor, and if you ever played it, you'll feel right at home, especially if you choose to play on the classic controls option. Now, I used standard controls from the get-go, which did take a bit of adjusting to, but after not too long, I settled right into them. Using melee strings to transition into sweeping kicks, or lifting kicks to send your opponents flying, and then following up with heavy finishes, vanishes, super attacks, and ultimates, it all feels extremely familiar, super nostalgic, and when you combine it with the huge roster of characters this game has to play as, it creates a Dragon Ball experience that, dare I say, might be the best I've ever experienced. Hopping into practice mode and experimenting with all the characters' movesets, skills, and transformations, and seeing all the unique character intros that play at the start of battles from both OG cast members and new ones alike, it's just an incredibly fun experience that I haven't had since I was sitting on my couch with a PS2 controller in my hand way back in the day. Seriously, the devs did an absolutely astounding job of capturing that classic Tenkaichi feel. The game is just eye candy too, by the way. It looks absolutely cinematic, and on PC at least, runs at a rock-solid 60 FPS, which it is unfortunate that the game is locked to 60 by default. You can unlock the frame rate, and man, let me tell you, this game at 144 frames is just
beautiful.
But unfortunately, if you do so, you can't play online, which is a bit of a bummer. I was really hoping that since there's no crossplay, PC folks would be able to enjoy higher frame rates, but for now at least, it looks like this isn't the case. Maybe this will get changed in the future, but I'm not too optimistic. Okay, so earlier I mentioned that gameplay initially had an extremely similar feel to the earlier titles. This is true, however, as I've played more and more, I've come to realize that things are actually quite a bit more different than I thought they would be. And there's one big reason why this is the case: defense. Sparking Zero is loaded with defensive options that are available in fights, much more so than any other Dragon Ball game I've ever played. These defensive options come in the form of mechanics known as perception, revenge counters, and super counters. We'll give a quick breakdown on them for context here. Perception allows you to hold or tap an input, circle on standard, or circle and triangle on classic, to counter incoming attacks. Holding down the input for extended periods of time does cost a bit of ki, and it doesn't stop ki blasts or grabs, but it does allow you to stop standard melee attacks, and if you have the skill gauge for it, you can even use it to stop charged attacks and deflect supers. If you perfectly time it when guarding an incoming melee string, you can even activate Sonic Sway, another defensive mechanic which allows you to dodge attacks while draining your opponent's ki before sending them flying backwards. When properly mixed in with standard defensive options such as guarding or sidestepping, and not just spammed, Perception can be an incredibly powerful tool. Clicking R3 or double tapping L1 on Classic is used to activate the next mechanic, known as a revenge counter. This allows you to, at the cost of skill meter, to sort of break out of a combo if you're being hit from the front. When I first picked up the game, I thought this was actually a pretty powerful tool. Being able to instantly just say no while your opponent is comboing you seemed pretty great. The problem with it though is that it costs quite a bit to use and can be easily vanished, blocked, or perceptioned, which by the way triggers a really cool visual. There are still some times when it could be beneficial to use, but for the most part, I think of this as sort of a last resort type option to use if I have spare skill meter to spend and my character is about to die. The next mechanic is known as a super counter, and it is by far the most powerful defensive tool available, but it is also the most skill intensive. It can be activated by pressing up and square the moment an attack hits you. The timing on this is super tight. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's around a 4 to 6 frame window that you have to activate this successfully. If you are able to get the timing down and pull it off though, super counters can be used on essentially any melee attack, whether it's in a rush string or vanishing attack. You can even super counter a super counter, which unfortunately I don't have footage of it because I just don't quite got it like that yet, but know that that is possible. There's also no key cost associated with using them, and using a super counter is the only way to get out of rush strings from behind, aka backshots, so if you don't like taking these, this is definitely something that you're going to want to work on. Now there is a bit of, I wouldn't call it controversy, but let's just say various bits of information floating around out there that describes the quote-unquote best way to super counter. The game instructs you to do up and square at the same time, while some people claim to find success in holding up and spamming the input. Personally, I've never been able to do that successfully, but I have seen people say that. Others though, including myself, seem to have found the best consistency by holding up and then just a split second later hitting square. I would personally recommend just hopping into training, setting the CPU to perform rush or vanish attacks, and just put in some time practicing. Find out what works for you, because being able to successfully use this mechanic is going to be important to finding success in online play. Now, these mechanics aren't solely what impact the feel and flow of combat in Sparking Zero. There's a heck of a lot more going on, and even if you master these, if your movement and neutral game aren't up to par, you're going to struggle. But the culmination of all these mechanics definitely do impact things. If you're up against a semi-competent player, you're not going to be able to just infinitely combo them around thanks to these defensive options. Your combo strings will absolutely get interrupted. Now personally, I'm a fan of this new gameplay flow. I enjoy the back and forths that take place between myself and opponents, and I think it creates an experience that to me feels more Dragon Ball-like, because for the most part the anime is not just about one character absolutely dominating the other. Sure, there's some exceptions to this, but to me, the fun of Dragon Ball has always been about each fighter powering up and trading with each other blow for blow, the back and forth fighting that goes on until a victor is finally determined. And as far as the roster goes, at 182 playable characters, I'd say it's pretty impressive. Of course, a decent percentage of that roster is Goku, with there being 19 playable versions of the character, 22 if you include Goku Black and the original Goku Black. That's a whopping 12% of the game's playable roster, FYI. But setting aside that fun fact, the huge variety of characters is definitely appreciated. The characters all feel great to play as too, even though by the very nature of the game's design, where essentially everyone has attack strings that are sort of shared, the characters still manage to feel unique enough in their own ways while playing. Sure, they aren't as unique as, say, the characters in Fighters, but remember that this isn't a true fighting game in that sense. I think the game strikes a nice balance so that it's fairly easy to pick up and play almost anyone, while at the same time not feeling incredibly stale. As an added bonus, characters can also be customized visually. There's a decent amount of outfits to choose from on some characters, but others have none to very little options. Accessory options are exactly the same. Not really a lot going on here. This is honestly something I was a bit disappointed with. I was expecting the game to be loaded with tons of different alternate costumes and accessories to use, but in reality, the game's sorely lacking in this department. I have no doubt that we'll be seeing a ton of these in the future though, otherwise this is a huge missed opportunity. It's worth noting here too that characters can also be customized with ability items or skill capsules. These can give you various effects like increased ki, health, attack damage, and more. They can be purchased in the in-game shop, which is where you can spend your hard-earned zenny to buy characters and the game's other unlockables, like background music, emotes, and strategy items that can be used to adjust CPU behavior. Which, that sort of segues perfectly into another gripe I had about the game, the CPU. It kind of sucks to fight against, even on the highest difficulty. Sure, in the beginning when you're sort of just learning the game, you might get cooked by the CPU a bit, but man, once you actually learn the game's mechanics, you'll find that CPU opponents are severely lacking. There may be a couple exceptions to this with some of the episode battle fights, but if you just queue up into a standard offline battle against the CPU, you'll find that they're very predictable, don't apply pressure, and are just overall a complete cakewalk compared to the experience of fighting an actual player. And yes, I know that it's not really fair to compare CPU opponents to real live human ones, but man, it's 2024, surely we can have CPU opponents that are fairly competent by now, right? Alright, let's move on to some of the additional features and game modes the game offers. First up is the Encyclopedia, which allows you to browse through all the game's characters. You can select them to inspect their movesets, as well as view detailed stat information. You can also see character use information here too, so you can get info on exactly how many times you've used each character, your playtime with them, and see your average battle time while using them. There's also an option for Girl Talk while browsing the list that lets you hear some thoughts from the commentary crew featuring Chi-Chi, Bulma, and Videl.
When Vegeta first came to Earth, he kept going on and on about being a prince or an elite or whatever. I just remember how nasty his attitude was.
Now he's a father of two and fights alongside Goku. Wow!
You and Goku were really positive influences on him.
Next up is the World Tournament mode, which makes a very welcomed return. You can choose to participate in either offline or online tournaments, create custom rules, or use presets based on tournaments from the show, such as the World Martial Arts Tournament, the Cell Games, or the Tournament of Power. Next up is Custom Battles, which is probably the biggest new addition to the game, and I think there's going to be a ton of time sunk into this. In this mode, you're able to create and share custom scenarios using a pretty powerful built-in creation tool. I haven't sunk a ton of time into this mode yet, but I have seen some of the work that's been done by others, and considering how new it is, I've been pretty impressed. There's huge potential for some incredible scenarios to be created using this. And when you add in the fact that the PC version of the game has modding support, I can only imagine what this is going to look like in the future. Oh, and by the way, there's already some, let's just call them questionable scenarios floating around out there. Lord help us. And of course, you couldn't have a Dragon Ball game without having the ability to acquire and use the Dragon Balls. This go around, you can choose to summon either Shenron, Purunga, or Super Shenron. You can acquire the Dragon Balls required to do so by completing quest objectives from Whis or completing certain episode battles. I believe they can also drop as rewards from completing offline battles, but I haven't seen that yet myself since most of my time that has been spent not in the story has been online. As far as what wishes the dragons are actually able to grant, it's a little bit underwhelming, honestly. With the exception of items and titles, nothing is really unique to the Shenron wishes. There aren't any special costumes or characters to unlock, at least not ones that can't just be purchased from the in-game store. I was really hoping for there to be a bit more variety or uniqueness to wishing, particularly with Super Shenron, but unfortunately, there just isn't. It's possible this could change in the future though, since it has been revealed that we're going to be getting some special what-if characters added to the roster. Maybe this is where they'll be acquired, we'll just have to wait and see. Before we conclude, let's talk a bit about online play, particularly ranked battles. Now, in the months leading up to release, we all knew that Sparking Zero wasn't going to be a balanced game. Due to the inherent nature of Dragon Ball and its characters, if you want to create a fun experience that's somewhat true to the show, there has to be some form of unbalance. I mean, it just wouldn't be fun if every character was on an equal playing field, and that's the way it's always been with games like this. Regardless of this fact, people in the community have already started looking down on people who use popular, powerful characters like SS4 Gogeta, Mastered Ultra Instinct Goku, Full Power Jiren, etc. Now, don't get me wrong, characters like this are stronger than the rest of the roster. No question about it. I mean, they have an extra health bar, which even if you don't factor in the rest of their toolkits, just that on its own is a huge advantage. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't be allowed to play them. Even if this isn't a serious fighting game, the fact that there's a ranking system will automatically make a large group of people gravitate towards whatever is considered meta. That's just the way some people are. If they think they're going to have an advantage while using a certain character, they'll do it. There's no way around it. And you know what? If they nerf that powerful character, they'll just find the next one. It's an endless cycle that will never end in competitive games. So you as a person need to make a choice. Are you going to be salty and bitch and moan about it, or just play the game? As frustrating as it can be to take L's from gimmicks like unblockable ults or instant sparking, things like that, a better player will have no problem dealing with these characters while climbing through the lower ranks. Now, once you get to the higher ranks, if you're dealing with extremely skilled players using the best characters in the game, you're gonna have to decide. Do you want to join them, or look at it as a challenge and try to beat them with less popular, weaker characters? Personally, as I've been climbing the ranks, I've been enjoying the challenge of fighting them because I really don't care if I win or lose. Every fight against someone is an opportunity to just get better and better at the game, and it just feels so good to collect wins against these stronger characters. Now, aside from the occasional fight with shitty connection quality, which sorry y'all, if your connection sucks, you're not getting a rematch, ranked battles do have one problem that I would actually call pretty serious: rage quitters. The more and more you play, the more you'll run into people that just alt F4 out of the game when they're about to lose the match. Now, this in itself isn't exactly a problem. The problem is that when this occurs, you lose your win, the opponent doesn't take a loss, and nothing happens. There's no penalty of any kind. This is unacceptable in a game like this. My guess is that something will be done about this in the future, but it is a little bit silly that some sort of penalty wasn't here from the get-go. To conclude, I'd just like to say that I've been having an absolute blast with Sparking Zero. Yes, it's not perfect, but goddamn, this game is fun. Let me know your takes on the game down below, and I'll see you on the next one.